Hey everybody, welcome to ThaxCast. As always, my name's Terrell. Thanks for coming by. With Christmas right around the corner, talking next week, people, I want to talk a little bit about one of the more prominent names in Christmas, Santa Claus or Kris Kringle or
Père Noël, Babo Natale, Pères Nicole.
Papa Gijo.
Okay.
you get the idea. So let's dive in and take a look at what made this man famous. First of all, when looking into the origins of Santa, I found it interesting that in an article on St. Nicholas and Christianity Today, the writer, Ted Olson, makes it a point to say that there is a lack of historical documents from his time to validate his existence. He also uses words like probably, supposedly, and questionable in ways that show that he doesn't really want to admit that this person really existed. The funny part is that there are no historical primary sources about Jesus either. Without going into this too deeply, the earliest documents about Jesus, the Bible, are from roughly 30 years after his death and stretch out to nearly 100 years after his death. And outside of the Bible, there are no definitive documents about Jesus within the first 100 years of his death. So it's interesting that this author is so quick to dismiss St. Nicholas as a real person when the evidence is about the same for both him and Jesus. Especially considering that St. Nicholas was a devout Christian that defended the church doctrine during the Great Persecution. Now, what can be more easily disputed are the actions attributed to him. This will all be relevant when we actually look at the history of St. Nicholas. So let's take a look at how St. Nicholas became the big-bellied bringer of benevolence.
Try saying that 5 times faster.
Well, he was born around the late 200s, circa 280 AD, in Patara Lycia, which is now part of Turkey. He later became the Bishop of Myra, a small Roman town in what is also now part of Turkey. St. Nicholas was not said to be fat nor jolly. He was said to be a wiry, intense, and defiant defender of the church doctrine during the great persecution of Diocletian, when Bibles were set ablaze and priests were forced to either renounce Christianity or face consequences up to and including execution. Nicholas defied the edicts and spent years in prison. Around the time that Constantine began promoting Christianity to the Romans, Nicholas was released from prison. The best-known story about Nicholas goes something like this. A father was heavily indebted and was ready to sell his 3 daughters into prostitution. The young Bishop Nicholas secretly delivered 3 bags of gold to the father to be used for their dowries, saving them from lives of prostitution. Another story that's lesser known today, and also a little bit less believable, is a story that Nicholas came across an inn whose keeper had murdered 3 boys, dismembered them, and put them in barrels in the basement to pickle them. Supposedly, Nicholas sensed that something had gone bad in the inn, found the boys, and resurrected them. By the Middle Ages, Nicholas was one of the most famous characters in history, with thousands of artists depicting him in their works, and several churches built in his honor. He reportedly died on December 6th, circa 343 AD. He was known as a patron saint of sailors and the protector of children with a nature for gift-giving. His reputation did nothing but grow from the time of his death until the time of the Reformation in the 1500s. With a reputation that large, other major stories started getting attributed to him, including stories originally made about the Norse god Odin and the Roman god Saturn. The Protestants were against the practice of honoring saints, and so they tried to push out all of the reverence around the saints. They were fairly successful, but getting rid of a legend of a gift giver was just too hard. So they replaced the legend of St. Nicholas as a gift giver and a behavior monitor with a similar story about baby Jesus rewarding good children. The problem was that baby Jesus wasn't intimidating, so various other devilish, mostly German, characters were made up to darkly mirror Nicholas to punish misdeeds. Characters like Ruklaus, or Rough Nicholas, Aschenklaus, Ashy Nicholas, and Pelsnickel, Furry Nicholas. These scary characters were to ensure that children behaved, or the child may be whipped or even kidnapped, possibly as beginning to Krampus, but I'm not going to go into that at this time. They also moved the celebration date for Nicholas's death to the pagan holiday of Saturnalia, and began taking symbolism from the pagan holiday to try to overtake the holiday for their own. The people of Holland weren't having it though. They maintained the celebrations of St. Nicholas, held on December 6th, and it was a common practice for children to put out their shoes the night before and find them in the morning with gifts inside that St. Nicholas, or Sinterklaas, had left them. The Dutch immigrants brought the legend of Sinterklaas with them to the Americas. This legend mixed with the darker, bearded characters of the Germans and became the beginnings of a new winter gift giver. Early American Christmas wouldn't be recognizable to most of us today. Most of New England was shunning the holiday, and in other parts of the would-be country, and also in England, it was a celebration of outdoor, alcohol-fueled community party. At this time, there wasn't a magical gift bearer. It wasn't until the early 1800s when several writers and poets decided to try to turn the holiday into more of a family celebration, and they reintroduced St. Nicholas as this amalgamation of the various European characters that had been brought over. In 1809, Washington Irving wrote Knickerbocker's History of New York, where he portrayed St. Nicholas as a pipe-smoking man soaring over rooftops in a flying wagon, giving gifts to the good girls and boys and switches to the bad. In 1821, there was an anonymously written poem called The Children's Friend that was the first appearance of Santa Claus, who was stripped of religious affiliations and was dressed in Germanic furs. In this story, his wagon was pulled by a single reindeer, and he carried a birch rod for the unvirtuous children. So where do we get the full, fairly finalized version of Santa Claus? Well, you probably already know the answer, even if you aren't aware of it. It was in this book right here, "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" by Clement C. Moore, originally titled A Visit from St. Nicholas. Written in 1820 and published in 1823, originally published anonymously, so there has been some disputes whether Moore actually wrote it or not, but it's fairly accepted that he was. So people like to say that the red suit was a fabrication of Coca-Cola. The red suit was cemented in place nearly a decade before Coca-Cola was created due to an illustration in a newspaper by political cartoonist Thomas Nast. From this final form, the story went through a reverse migration back to Europe, where he was given more local names like Père Noël and Father Christmas. And that's it. That's how we came from St. Nicholas to Santa Claus. These characters have stirred up even more trouble through the ages, but that would be a whole other video on its own, particularly in the Soviet Union. So that's it for today. Tell me what you thought about it in the comments. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it. Give it a thumbs down if you didn't. I'm always curious to hear what you have to say. Remember to share the video and subscribe to my channel. Be safe as you travel for the holidays. Please don't drive drowsy. Pull over and take a nap if you need to, but there's just too many times where people are killed because of drowsy driving. This will probably be the last video for me for this year because the next couple of weeks are busy, but look forward to the first of the year because I've got a couple of things in mind that are going to be a little bit different, and I think that you'll really enjoy it. So as always, thanks for coming by, be good to each other, and have a good one.